Very much, John. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, Athens Centre. This place is a little Paradisos, a little walled garden of civilization in a vast, scary jungle. And every time I'm here, I'm just so happy that it exists and that John and Rosemary put it together, kept it alive, kept it full of really nice, smart, engaged people doing interesting things. And so I'm honored to be in their company tonight, and I thank you all very much for coming. And here is what the book looks like. And unfortunately, Greek tax law makes it impossible for anyone to start a small business without paying thousands of euros and then hundreds of euros a month. So it is illegal to sell anything without a business license and a tax number. And not having those, I cannot sell you the book tonight, though I would like to. But you can go to Janos bookstore, which sells it at a reasonable discount. You can go to several other Athens bookstores, and it's available, and they're all very friendly, and they have many good books to look at besides this one. Now let me just sort of set the tone for the evening with, I think it's my favorite picture in the world, and I'm sorry I don't have the projector with the adapter, but picture, this is a little guy in a bad suit. He is the weapons technician of the Greek police who has showed up on the scene after the rocket attack against ship owner Vardis Vardinogiannis, who's still around and still scary even today. And what he is doing is he has picked up and is carrying with enormous lack of enthusiasm, but enormous loyalty and futility, an unexploded bazooka round that hit the vehicle, bounced off, did not explode, and he is carrying it like this across the field to where it will be put in somewhere and taken away. And this, for me, is an accurate metaphor, not only for how I spend my life, but also for how the world works. People pathetically under-equipped to do necessary things, that must be done, going out there and sort of staggering through, hoping they don't blow up. And my book is sort of the same thing. I started off as an archaeologist and ancient historian. Archaeology and ancient history gave me some very valuable tools which came in handy as I was writing this book. But then I was a diplomat, and as a diplomat I mostly sat at a desk and I read newspapers, and I would go and talk to the foreign ministry and other diplomats like my friend Robert here, and we would have great conversations, and I would write long telegrams. But I had no experience in fighting terrorism except the little bit of overlap of my job with the work of the people actually chasing 17 November and Ella, that is to say, the CIA station and the FBI contingent in Athens, who were working very closely, well, sometimes very closely, with the Greek police and with the Greek intelligence service and with their British counterparts, trying to find this group. But I decided the book needed to be written, and I looked around. I waited several years after the group was arrested in 2002, realized that the book was not being written, and that everyone seemed determined to forget the whole thing had ever happened. And when everyone is determined to forget that something ever happened, that's a good excuse to take a second look at it. And anyway, my chief motive was actually American domestic politics at the time, because the overreaction in the United States to 9/11, all the really stupid and unnecessary things we did, all the really stupid and unnecessary things the United States did to itself after being struck this blow in 2001, made me think it's really good to look at terrorists, whatever we call them, through the microscope, describe them carefully, demythologize them, and try to put them in a context in which the damage they do to society is kept to a minimum. And I ended up writing a book aimed at basically demythologizing this famous Greek terrorist group, 17 November, which killed 23 people, including 4 American officials and 1 Greek driver at the embassy. A group that wounded many more Americans, killed police officers, killed Turkish diplomats, created a legend around itself that did not need to be created, should not have been created, and ultimately did a lot of damage to Greek society, I would say. Anyway, when I started writing this book, I thought this is going to be an easy book because we have all of these, a big stack of confessions that members of the group members of 17 November had signed back when they were caught in 2002. We had an enormous trial record full of hundreds of witness accounts. We had substantial documentary evidence in the trial record and thus theoretically public. And I thought, okay, we also had a couple of pretty good books in Greek written by journalists who had access to ministers and senior police officers who had fed them all kinds of really nice gossip over the years. So there are lots of information. Unfortunately, the crucial mistake I made was getting on my bicycle and going up to Korydallos Women's Prison, where the appeals trial of 17 November was going on in 2007, 2008, 2009. And I didn't go to every one of the 100-odd sessions, maybe 200-odd sessions of the trial. But I went to some of them, and I sat and I listened to the lawyers, and I listened to the witnesses, and I sat under the no smoking signs while those defendants who were not in jail were all smoking, and tried to talk to them. And what became clear, over a gradual, sort of painful process, was that the official story, as recorded in the confessions and faithfully reproduced in the judge's decisions in the first trial, could not be correct. Too many contradictions with what people had, with what eyewitnesses had seen at the time of 17 November's attacks. Too many contradictions just internally with the limited forensic evidence that was presented. And at a certain point, the worst part of my character came out. First of all, I should never have been a diplomat because I would much rather sit in an empty room with a large jigsaw puzzle and put it together than pick up the telephone and call the foreign ministry and say, what do you think about such and such? Every time you pick up the telephone, something ego-abrading is very likely to occur. Whereas if you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, every time you find a piece, there's this little bit of dopamine reward in the brain, and you just feel good. So, at any rate, I set out essentially to maximize my rewards by treating 17 November as one would treat an enormous jigsaw puzzle with 98% of the pieces missing and a whole bunch of pieces from other jigsaw puzzles thrown into the box. Anyway, that attitude actually worked pretty well. The biggest and best piece I obtained was photocopies of 3 notebooks in which a diligent member of 17 November, a new notebook was created after every bank robbery, and this person would carefully write, first of all, the amount of money they had left over from the previous page, then a code name, sometimes a date, and a purpose, like Vang 17-3 Yatr, which means Vangelis, March 17th, Yatros, doctor. and an amount of money. And I happily I was sitting on just very close to a beach on Naxos, courtesy of some friends of ours, and with my laptop, just typing in all of these amounts into an Excel spreadsheet. Actually, it is amazingly boring work, except for me, I sort of enjoyed it. And it turns out when you do this, you actually begin to understand what is going on. You start to see patterns. You start to be able to tag expenses. You can segregate out the people, the code names in the group, the purposes of the payments in the group, the amounts, the dates. You can organize them, and then you can look at them systematically. And when you do that, and then you go get on your bicycle and ride up the mountain, halfway up the mountain, there is this amazing feeling when you suddenly realize, oh, hell, every Christmas, every Easter, and every summer vacation, this set of payments is the bonuses that they received as members of the group, and they were entitled to, at these 3 times a year. And once you do that, then suddenly you have a tool for saying exactly how many members of the group there are at a given time, how important they are, but on the size of their bonuses, whether they're missing at various times. You can then track how their bonus payments go from year to year. You see who drops out and then reappears. And then you can go look at all the other evidence you have and compare that, that picture with what's in the trial record, what's in the confessions, what's in the personal biographies of the people who are arrested as members of the group. And in a very long, slow process, it took me about 5 years, but full of little insights that just made my heart go pitter-pat. I came up with a narrative that more or less works. I mean, huge gaps. I would say I started out with 98% of the pieces missing. Now only about 80% of the pieces are missing. And in those huge holes, you can still put anything or anyone you want to. But there are some crucial conclusions you can draw that make it harder to be stupid about Greek terrorism than it was in the past. And for example, the most important conclusion probably from the book for a Greek audience is that you can look at the inventories of the safe houses, you can look at the financial notebooks, you can track really very nicely how the group has robbed a bank, it has money, it spends that money, the amount of money it spends shrinks a little bit as money starts to run out. You get the feeling they're starting to get nervous at the end. Their accounting, just before they run out of money, their accounting gets very sloppy. And you can tell that someone's having a crisis. Then they go and rob another bank. And suddenly, everyone gets paid their missing bonuses. And they rent bigger and better apartments. And they start doing more ambitious attacks. And then a few years later, they've run out of money again. And now you can see little things where they're sort of bouncing checks to each other. And then they stop keeping any records at all. I mean, the notebooks go silent for a bit. Then they pull up their socks, rob another bank, and suddenly the notebooks start again. And then finally in May of 1997, something happens, and the group leaves a single leaf of paper with some of the rental payments scribbled on that using different names for the same houses, which is a very bad security technique. It allowed me to break at least one of the codes they were using. But somehow they stopped keeping these records. Their politics changed significantly. An act they had never publicly taken credit for, the rocket attack on the U.S. Embassy in 1996, 96, they finally took credit for. And you can see something has happened in the group, and the guy who was keeping the records has either gotten angry and left, or something has been taken away from him and they've changed course. All right, that is a long way of saying I had a great time writing the book. Unfortunately, the book got very long because the only way to start it was to look at the anti-junta resistance. Greece had a dictatorship from 1967 to 1974. Most Greeks reacted passively to that dictatorship. Life went on. A handful, mostly from the left, but also from the constitutionalist center, some good, serious liberals, some, but some of the best and brightest, well, actually, the best and brightest people in Greece, as far as I'm concerned, tried to resist the junta, and they did it in a number of ways. That included, for example, Kostas Simitis taking a defective little bomb and planting it at an Esso Papas gas station. And according to the trial report, it did 20,000 drachmas of damage to the hose. That is not a great deal. He was able to escape the country, but most of the people with him were arrested and put in jail, tortured. Not tortured as badly as many people were tortured, because they were university-educated children of many of them of respectable families. They had a kind of prestige. And the torturable class, well, communists got tortured very badly. If you weren't a full-fledged communist, you weren't tortured quite as badly most of the time. But out of this anti-junta resistance movement, a bunch of bombers, when democracy was restored in 1974, a few of them from the far left, mostly with Maoist beliefs, but some of them strongly influenced by Italian autonomist views, decided that the battle was never against the dictatorship. It was against the system of capitalist imperialist exploitation that in their minds brought about the dictatorship. I think they were wrong about that, but never mind. Anyway, they believed firmly that the war was still going on and that the same tactics they had used during the dictatorship needed to be continued but improved upon. And the group that came together to do this was Ella. Originally, according to a memoir by a man named Koufoudinas, Dimitris Koufoudinas, who sort of ended up being the leading figure of 17 November. 17 November started out as a cell of Ella beginning in 1975. They rapidly discovered that they detested each other. 17 November felt that Ella was verbose and unrealistic in its expectations for political violence. 17 November believed that the only way you could make an impact was by proving to the Greek masses that it was perfectly possible for them to go and kill the CIA station chief. And it turned out to be perfectly possible in those days to drive up to the house of the CIA station chief, and shoot him dead when he gets out of his car. The next 20-some years, I'm not going to describe because it would take a long time, and I don't think it's good use of your time or mine. If you read the book, you will learn an amazing amount about how about 80% of 17 November's tactical decision-making was influenced by a behind-the-scenes, mostly invisible dialogue with Ella, their rivals, their hated rivals. One of the things that I discovered, I think I'm I'm actually pretty sure I'm the first person to have discovered this, and it makes a very complicated but morbidly amusing chapter of my book, is how, at a certain point, an enterprising secret informant working for the Greek intelligence service, occasionally for the Greek police, possibly for the CIA, possibly for the KGB as well, and selling secrets from one side to the next, managed to actually find a couple of members of 17 November who were trying to expand their operations and build a new bomb wing. He didn't know that he had found them, but he and it seems like it was Koufoudinas, though Koufoudinas is never going to admit this in a million years. I have sort of indirect sources that I only half trust, and I don't make a big thing of it in the book. Anyway, this secret informant named Danos Christalis agreed with some members of 17 November to plant a bomb at the German embassy. German embassy is always a popular target. It was a bomb that would not have gone off. It was basically a large propane canister with a crude gunpowder igniter. But Danos Christalis seems to have written the proclamation for it, which was he's a bright guy. I've had some interesting conversations with him. He's almost impossible to follow because he speaks very quickly in Greek slang that I don't know. But when I asked him about this particular proclamation, his eyes sort of lighted up a little bit. And anyway, he wrote the proclamation. The bomb was planted. It didn't go off. It was claimed in the name of a non-existent group called Revolutionary Team Christos Kasimis. Then the police, who never trusted Christalis and hated the Greek intelligence service, he'd been following around. They concluded he was a genuine terrorist as opposed to a secret informant, so they arrested him, and he was forced to sort of shout from the courtroom, "Wait, wait, I'm really a secret informant." And he was able to prove that he really was a secret informant. And there was an amazing set of, 17 November was furious, but also terrified. Ella was gleeful, but also furious. 17 November ended up having to keep this organization it created alive, essentially to prove that they had no connection with it. And this organization became a tool for planting very small symbolic bombs and then writing huge, long proclamations blasting Ella for all of its sins over the past 10 years. And it's hysterically funny, and it's been silenced because it doesn't serve the myth that 17 November wanted to leave for itself, but also the myth that Greek society had built up and does not want too brutally disrupted. Anyway, so the book was all about discoveries like that. The bottom line, though, for policy purposes, if you want to catch a group like 17 November, you have to work. You have to read their proclamations, analyze them, use computers. You have to look seriously at the forensic evidence. You have to do network analysis that looks at past organizations, looks at the climate, looks at the ideology of various groups. You have to be systematic in a way that the Greek police never were. And I'm afraid the CIA wasn't either. They thought they were being systematic, but just putting something in a computer without knowing what you're doing with it is not the same thing as being systematic. A huge amount of effort was wasted. The group probably could have been caught much sooner. The good news, as I was going to say, and then I got sidetracked, was that all of the evidence shows that 17 November was an entirely self-sustained organization. There's not a shred of good evidence that anyone outside was supplying it with weapons. Instead, it was going to Greek arsenals and stealing them. No one was supplying it with money. It was instead with great reluctance, robbing banks. He got better at it at the end as they were building up their retirement fund. But but it's clear that robbing banks wasn't something they liked doing. Their information came mostly from reading Eleftherotypia and Andi and other, left-leaning magazines. They did some archival research of their own. They probably, sitting on the boat to their Greek islands, would get in conversations with people, and they picked up little scraps of material that way. But by and large, it is easy to say that they had no. If you don't get money, weapons, or intelligence, or training, they weren't actually very good shots. If you don't get any of those things from outsiders, it's very unlikely you're going to be working for outsiders, because why should you when they're not doing anything for you? And anyway, I think I've been able to put a final nail in the coffin. I mean, the Kappa Kappa Epsilon, the Greek Communist Party, which saw 17 November as dangerous rivals, that is, as people who would distract the proletariat from the real revolutionary force, which was, of course, the Communist Party of Greece. So the KKE always said that they were an organization sponsored by the CIA to destabilize Greece. New Democracy said they were sponsored by Andreas Papandreou and PASOK to destabilize Greece and punish his enemies. Other people had other theories, but in fact they were exactly what they said they were: a little group of fanatical militants with a hyperactive sense of personal responsibility, a overly strong sense of justice, a deep resentment that Greece, in their perception, was a banana republic, a perception many Greeks do share even now, and that's not a fair perception. Greeks, I mean, that picture there, that picture is everywhere. The world is much more messed up and incompetent than Greeks believe. Greeks want to think that somewhere there's this island of competence and mature adult behavior. It doesn't exist. So, at any rate, they were a small group, never able to recruit many members, able to attack, able to use only as much violence as a non-violent Greek society would tolerate, which is every time they killed someone, they would then have to wait until the outrage dissipated. It turns out the Greeks do not really approve of people killing each other, and this is a very good disapproval to have. In more violent societies, the terrorists are much more violent and much more dangerous. So, I mean, one lesson for the future is, let's hope the Syriza government fulfills its promises, especially about keeping the police less violent, because police violence was always a trigger for revolutionary counter-violence, as 17 November and others called it. Anyway, I've spoken too much. I am very happy to take questions about my book, or really anything else. I'm, archaeology, the Institute. But anyway, thank you for listening. So.